Welcome to Tough Talk with Teachers.
Real teachers that are in the trenches every day sharing authentic struggles, successes, and you can't make this up type of stories.
Edu-earners that talk the talk and walk the walk. We are back today, and today we're going to be discussing some different things that just a lot of you might not have any knowledge about, or maybe you want more knowledge about. So I'm going to throw it to Whitney, and she's going to tell you what we're talking about today.
Well, I know as my background is in elementary education, and I was not going to ever teach in special ed or maybe a year before I switched over and went back to the gen ed elementary classroom. And well, that didn't happen. I got sucked into SPED and I love it, and I'm never leaving. But there's so many different things for a gen ed teacher that are difficult about working with special education students or even students with 504s or, English language learners. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about how to incorporate more strategies and to really appropriately give our students modifications and accommodations in the classroom and easier ways to do it quickly, effectively, and, just making it more user-friendly, because sometimes I know gen ed teachers get a list of modifications and accommodations from us SPED people, and they're like, holy cow, how am I supposed to do these 20 things? Like, that's crazy.
And let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Because some people might not know the difference. Can you tell us what the difference is between the two?
For sure. So I sometimes even still get confused on it because we lump them together all the time. So a modification is like changing what students are actually learning, whereas an accommodation is changing how they're learning. And typically in the gen ed classroom, it's more of a accommodation that we're providing them more than a modification. But, there is overlap and different things like that.
Well, thank you for that, because I know sometimes myself I get confused because I kind of just lump them together as the same thing when they are clearly not the same thing.
Yeah, so like a modification, like a student has different learning outcomes than their peers. So maybe they're only supposed to know, 2 food groups instead of all the food groups or something like that. Whereas an accommodation, the student has the same learning outcome. They have to know all the food groups just like their peers, but they're going to have something like tweaked a little bit, using something different to meet the needs to access that same curriculum as the peers.
Whitney, tell us maybe some other examples of how we can adjust in the classroom, like on the fly, to make things a little easier or simpler for us.
And now I'm going to go ahead and apologize that a lot of my ideas come from more of a secondary or upper elementary level than, with the super littles. So those are slightly different, but my experiences with the older guys. But a lot of the things are typically like providing study guides for a student. Well, you don't have to create a brand new study guide. Find the one that goes with your textbook, or give them a copy of your notes or your slideshows that you've gone over in class. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't feel like you have to sit down and recreate something from scratch. Another one, it kind of goes along with that, is like a lot of times we have students that either can't write, they can't keep up, or they need to just sit and absorb the information or the activity in class, and they can't, take notes or, just kind of do stuff like that. And again, they could have fill in the blank notes. You could print off that PowerPoint and white out a couple of different words and draw a blank, and then have them, so they're still paying attention, they're following along, but they're not having to handwrite all of that stuff out. Or you could even have another student in your class that is an awesome note taker. At the end of class, you could just run and make a copy, or have that student, set up something to where they can have a copy of those. So, like for your more direct instruction kind of things, like that's really easy to do.
All right. So, for example, if I had a kid that they do not get a grade for a certain math aspect, do you think it's still good to teach them those skills, or on grade level, I should say? Or should I adjust for their ability, or is it still good to always be teaching those kids on grade level?
I think that's kind of like one of those questions that could be like a case-by-case basis, depending on the kid, depending on their disability, depending on the needs. But it doesn't hurt to expose a kid to something that they may not be able to grasp. Like, we have a lot of students with numerous disabilities that unfortunately don't have the skill set or the time, because they're going to graduate in 12th grade. They're not going to be here till the 28th grade, but they're not going to have the time to get access to algebra, maybe. But if they still, they're seeing stuff around, they're seeing their friends' homework and that kind of thing. And so, exposing them just a little bit here and there so they're not like, why the heck are there letters in math? That's weird. Or other content. It's the same thing, like the Holocaust. You may not go super in depth with a kid about the Holocaust, but you need to still be aware of that and, or see a couple of pictures or something, but they may not have the full unit on that topic.
I gotcha. So with those kiddos, sometimes we struggle with those accommodations and modifications to not get them done, but to make it work with them in the classroom to fit everyone too. Do you have a suggestion for that? If you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't know if this is exactly what you're going for. But, last year I was in a co-taught English 3 class. So it was juniors. And, I'm still doing that this year. But last year I'm thinking of a specific example. Whereas the original test had 5 answers for every single multiple choice. Well, we knew with this specific group, not just the SPED kids or the ELL kids that were in there, but the entire group was a little bit lower than their peers. So we nixed one of those 5 answers. And so that whole class had 4 answers, whereas then some of our kids had either a lower difficulty or shortened assignments. And so we then even shortened their test down to, 2 answers for our students that were ELL. And some of our IEPs had 3 answers. So there was 3 or 4 different tests going around, but it was the same content.
Perfect. Do you have any other suggestions? And I know that you work in the higher level grades, but do you have any suggestions at all for, say, even 4th grade?
I taught in a 2nd grade classroom for part of my student teaching, and then I was in a self-contained special ed class in Belize that had kindergarten through 8th grade all together at once with varying levels of disability. So I do have some experience for sure with those little guys, but there's different things that you can do or strategies. There might be preferential seating listed, and hopefully in that IEP it's a well-written IEP that says near the teacher, away from distractions, away from the door, or what is preferential about that. And if that's not listed, that's something you should definitely ask your SPED teacher or the case manager about. But I remember having this one kid, he had severe ADHD and was not medicated or not medicated regularly. And in 7th grade, I literally put painter's tape on the floor and I gave him his preferential seating, which was away from distraction. So he was actually kind of in the back of the room, and I put the painter's tape and I said, all right, Kenny, you can get up, you can move around, you can sit under your desk, whatever movement you need to have, you can do this within this box, but I don't want you to leave this box. And that worked out pretty well for him. It was kind of cool to see that, and then some of our students, have reduced paper pencil task. Maybe it's an occupational thing where the kid physically can't write, but a lot of times, worksheet, that's just a drain on a kid, whether it's attention deficit, they can't focus on all of those words together, or you limit the number of writing prompts, pick the 2 best writing prompts out of the 5 writing prompts or something like that. And then giving them projects instead of worksheets, or having them do it on a computer. That was my saving grace, because I have a learning disability. That was my saving grace growing up, was I typed all my stuff instead of handwriting it. And I was able to use spell check, and I could get my thoughts out. I could rearrange things the way that I needed to, which really helped. And, another thing would just be doing some certain things orally. I know some of the younger grades have TAs in the room, instead of giving that test on paper, just ask them the questions or pull them aside while everybody else is taking the test or doing the assignment or something like that.
And do you have any suggestions that, say, a regular ed teacher they're working with the SPED teacher, but they're still struggling. Do you just suggest just going back to that SPED teacher for additional help to see what else they can do to help this child?
For sure. Like, there definitely needs to be an open line of communication. Like, I always want feedback from my gen ed teachers because I'm not in that class with that kid. So I'm not seeing what you're seeing. I'm not seeing the environment. I'm not seeing the assignments necessarily or things like that. And so I want to know what the gen ed teacher's perspective is. And I mean, gen ed teachers are as competent, if not more, than us SPED people. So, like, you know, you need to have that communication. But for some reason, if there's maybe not a good relationship or you're not making progress, go to talk to another teacher that has that same kid or had that kid the year before and be like, what did you do in this situation? Because I've done that. I've run out of ideas, you know, and I had a gen ed teacher asking me about this, like, what do I do about this kid? I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm at a loss myself because I'm doing everything I can on my end. I know you're doing everything on your end. And so I jumped back to a teacher who had a good relationship the year before, and I'm like, oh, she was doing X, Y, and Z. All right, let's try these. And I brought that back to his current teacher, and boom, we had a solution.
Well, that's really awesome that you're able to do those things. And that's what they always talk about. You're not a classroom teacher. You're a school teacher, right? Because all kids are everybody's kids.
Exactly.
And you have to work together to try to make those kids successful. And I think that's just a great partnership. That's just common sense, really, to me. I mean, you should work with anybody and everybody who's been in contact with said child to make them successful, to do whatever you can to help this child with their accommodations or modifications that they have.
For sure. And like, I love having those relationships. Everything that I do is relationship based, whether it's with my coworkers or my students, or both of those relationships working together for the betterment of a student and the sanity of a teacher, you know, and it's just, that's why we're here.
It is. And I'd like to just wrap this up and just say thank you, Whitney, for talking to us about these things, because I know, like I said, I used to lump them together. And then, you know, I talked to the SPED teacher that, you know, I had a child in my class, and they're like, oh, no, it's completely different. You don't lump them together. And, you know, it was a learning process for me. It was in my early years of teaching, of course. It's not like it was yesterday, okay? People don't freak out. But, you know, I'm so glad that you were able to clarify that, because there might be some new teachers out there that listen to our podcast and they don't know. They're just lumping them together.
And something I will say, like, I have a quick guide to modifications and accommodations, and a lot of the stuff is the stuff that I talked about. And as a SPED teacher, at my last job, I passed this out pretty often, you know, or once a year to my teachers when I was passing out those mod and accoms, and, you know, to help make their life a little bit easier. So maybe this is a resource and a tool that you want. So we will link it in the show notes, and feel free to beg, borrow, steal it. It is not copyrighted, so enjoy.
All right. Well, thank you again, Whitney, and we will catch you guys next time. Here at Tough Talk with Teachers,
we know teaching is tough, but so are you.